Hello, welcome to another episode of Sustainability Changemakers. We're here with Shannon Reddy. I'm so excited for this conversation. So why don't you just go ahead and tell us about how you've come to work in this denim space and what your role and your expertise are in this area.
Sure, yeah. Thank you for having me as well. So I currently work at Denim Dudes, and my position is as a trend forecaster, writer, and designer. We wear a lot of hats at Denim Dudes. But I kind of came into this position because I wanted to study fashion. I went to FITM, the Fashion Institute, Design and Merchandising here in LA, and I studied design and product development. And I went into the industry doing sales and marketing for a women's contemporary brand. And after about a year, I was like, this isn't it for me. And while I was in school, I constantly was drawn towards the casual wear market and denim specifically. I ended up going back to school because FITM launched a business of denim program. So I was like, this was meant to be. This is it. So got really entrenched in the whole world of denim through that program. And then I actually was fortunate enough to go to Amsterdam for a Kingpins show, like 2018, back, before COVID and everything.
Yeah.
And that's where I met Amy Leverton, who's now my boss. I saw her presenting and I was like, oh my God, that's what I want to do. Because I've always been so kind of fascinated by trend. And then it's more like the human aspect and the sociology behind why are people wearing what they're wearing and why is the industry doing what it's doing. So after I finished the denim program, I reached out to her, and it started out as kind of like an intern / assistant and grew into sort of a mentorship. And now I've been full time with her for about 4 or 5 years now. So yeah, it's been great. And I was really lucky to kind of find this niche, I think, for myself.
No, I love that. You saw what you liked and you got your foot in the door, and now you've been working there. That's fabulous. So yeah, I think we often, trends, we see them portrayed in like a negative light oftentimes because it implies that like something's coming in and it's going to go out and be thrown out. So how do you reconcile like working with trends and sustainability?
It's a tricky one. I almost feel like the word trend is a bit of a dirty word now these days. So it's funny because we sort of think about it as future forecasting and what is that future going to look like in terms of, society, culture, and everything, and then distill that down into how that affects denim. And it's interesting because, sustainability doesn't just relate to the environment. A lot of people, I think, associate it with environmental sustainability, but it's also, social, cultural, economic. So those are a lot of big points we touch on when we do sort of consumer trends and present to brands and everything. But it is interesting because I think over the last 10 years, the landscape of trend forecasting has changed a lot. It's deepened in some ways, the way we've seen sort of pop culture deepen. It's much more tied, like I said, to social, environmental issues and movements, the global economy. Whereas 10 years ago, it could be about, this celebrity or nowadays influencer wore this jean and now it's trending. For an example, Bella Hadid wore baggy jeans. Now baggy jeans searches are up 20%, which does happen. But it's also the deeper part of why are baggy jeans trending. It's because, the noughties and 90s that was brought in by Gen Z and their kind of craving for nostalgia brought in that baggy jean trend. And you can take it a step further and even interpret that as, women really taking on baggy jeans for the first time in decades is kind of like, in my opinion, like a response to the male gaze we've all been subliminally subjected to. And can be used as a tool against objectification, and we're reclaiming what we think is sexy and cool. So, it goes a lot deeper than I think people think it does. And then again, when talking about brands who may be trending and in terms of sustainability, there are great examples out there, I think, of brands who center sustainability culturally, ethically, everything at the center. Think of like Sky High Workwear, who just got a deal with Nordstrom, actually, and that brand was born out of a mission to support the farm
Mm-hmm.
and not the other way around. So I think it's a really good example of like it's a new model for a brand,
Mm-hmm.
and it proves sticking with your convictions actually is appealing to the consumer. So you can reinvent the wheel a little bit, and it can work.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, it sounds like you're saying so almost like the the the, the darker side of trends, that's like always shifting or pushing something to the top. It's almost like sustainability is using that for the better and uh, changing the focus from whatever XYZ to, oh no, it's sustainability that's at the top of this totem pole. And then also
It is.
what I hear from you is that you're saying also like trend forecasting can be something that's future focused and that's building up over a long period of time. And even though to like consumers it could seem like, oh, just like spring collection of 2023, but really
Mhm.
it's like years of where society was headed to anyway, and just maybe operating in that space for longer. Like maybe we don't see this from our end, but it's happening behind the scenes. So. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It's kind of like, it really is like the zeitgeist of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what pushes fashion forward, especially denim. Denim's always been so intertwined with, it's a sign of the times, the
Mm-hmm.
way people are wearing denim, the way they're remaking it, decorating it, everything like that. So it's interesting because sustainability, like I said, whether it's like cultural, environmental, it kind of really is the base of everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's talking to brands about like alternative business models and
Mm-hmm.
degrowth and these things that are very counterintuitive
Mm-hmm.
to what you think trend forecasting is. A lot of people think it's just, oh, what silhouettes and what washes are going to be trending for next season? How can I sell more jeans?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of was the basis of it. But I think at Denim Dudes, since we are so entrenched
Mm-hmm.
in the denim industry and
Mm-hmm.
we know how brands work and what the consumer wants, we kind of were able to push deeper conversations and deeper topics. And then just as the world's changing, I think that's needed. Consumers need to be educated about clothing. And so things are just getting deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I like that. Yeah, that trends can deal with models, and not just a wash. Yeah. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So, what are some trends that you can tell us about that are happening on the B2B side of things?
Well, it's interesting. There's always a lot, and something we found just by working in the industry, and then when
Mm-hmm.
COVID happened, is that there's so much going on in the supply chain. There's so many moving parts, and when you're in a full-time design position, you don't have time to keep up on the latest innovation. What is this wash house doing? What are these
Mm-hmm.
mills doing? And so we actually created a report specifically for denim design teams and then also the supply chain to keep up on what's new and with each other. So we do have a report that focuses specifically on like B2B supply chain trends.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of interesting things that we reported on this season was kind of like a system reboot and really kind of overhauling these old systems and old ways of thinking and doing things, um, that a lot of I think companies and brands have been doing. I think not on the B2B side, on the B2C side, like Patagonia, for
Mm-hmm.
example, completely just rewrote the rules in terms of what a successful company can be and the legacy it can leave
Mm-hmm.
for the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess, yeah, just a few more. There's a lot of like inter-industry collaboration
Yeah.
happening and
Oh, cool.
streamlining of supply chains,
Mm-hmm.
in order to increase transparency.
Mm-hmm.
So there's things like that. Yeah, I think there's a lot more change that needs to happen on that side, but I think the ball is rolling now. The ball is rolling, and I think what we've seen, especially since COVID, is that a lot of people, you want to keep business as usual and you want to, push for higher profit margins and expand production capacity, but do it more sustainably.
Mm-hmm.
However, you realize the system itself is not sustainable,
Hmm.
and that's what you have to shift. And so I think there has been a shift in seeing people implement sustainable production methods and really push to do better. Um, but they're hard topics, talking about re-implementing structure and, degrowth, producing less. They're hard topics for an industry that is based on production and growth and consumption.
Yeah.
So it's like the duality of it all.
Yes. Yeah. No, it
Yeah.
definitely true. Yeah, something to think about. And it's interesting too the perspective you have working at Denim Dudes, and kind of getting your hand in a lot of different areas. So, are there some projects that you've worked on at Denim Dudes that have helped towards the industry's sustainability goals, that you can tell us about?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned before, our denim directory reports really aim at, we work with mills from all over the world, vendors from all over the world. Denim Privé is one of them. And we really try to cut through the marketing language and make everything as easy to understand and quick to read as possible for designers, so you don't get caught up in any greenwashing, and there's no, nothing is left to open to interpretation. So all the facts about the fabrics, the processes, everything is there. And it's also a really good starting point for designers to be able to ask the right questions.
Mm. Hmm.
Because like I said, there's so much going on in our industry. Every mill, has a speciality or something, some capability that someone else might not have. And designers just don't know what to ask for a lot of times in terms of sustainability,
Yeah.
because things are constantly changing as well. Um, a couple of things, we've done several design collaborations with um, mills and wash houses, and it's all been aimed at exemplifying what you can do with sustainable wash technologies, and how far you can kind of push those aesthetics and what you can get out of them. um, but it's interesting because what we've learned is that there's still a lot of room to grow.
Hmm.
And some processes needed to create, I want to say like those viral moment worthy denim
Hmm.
washes.
Yeah.
The sustainable technology just isn't quite there yet.
Hmm.
um, which is almost a good thing because it means there's room to improve, there's room to grow. I mean, it would be horrible if everything was available to us and we just weren't using it
Hmm.
yet, right?
Hmm.
um, which also makes me think of an interesting point, because a lot of those, really exaggerated finishes and heavily textured surfaces, and the really like eye-catching high fashion finishes, um, yeah, the technology is just not there
Hmm.
to make them sustainably. And it's kind of something we ponder at Denim Dudes, where it's like, what's better for the environment? Is it 100,000 pairs of jeans that were washed with, PP alternatives and stone alternatives that are, the consumer might keep for a season, there's nothing special about them? Or, 1,000 pairs of the most epic jeans, handcrafted. Maybe we used PP, maybe it was necessary to use some chemicals,
Hmm.
but, the water filtration methods, yeah, everything in production is clean. And those pairs are
Hmm.
coveted and treasured and taken care of for years and years to come.
Hmm.
So it's, again, a tricky balance, because I think mass production has a lot to do with
Hmm.
the problem.
Hmm.
If we were producing less and we couldn't use the most sustainable processes, it might not be as bad for the environment as mass production using some more sustainable
Hmm.
methods.
Yes. Yeah, that's always a good point. There's definitely the shift is not just there's a need for a shift not just on the producer side, but also on the consumer side with that element as well. So, um, yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah, thanks.
And that's where we sit at an interesting intersection with Denim Dudes,
Hmm.
because our clients and our main bulk of our business is working with denim mills, denim brands, and kind of behind the scenes. Um, but we've kind of amassed this Instagram following that is a mix of both, industry members and then just consumers and denim heads and people who are genuinely interested in the fashion industry. Um, and I think we've seen that a lot on social media, where there are accounts who their main goal is to educate consumers about responsible production,
Hmm.
just letting people in on the fashion industry, because
Hmm.
it's something that, everybody wakes up every day and we put on clothes. It's something everybody does, but not a lot of people know how your t-shirt is made or how your jeans are made. So I think the level of information that's now getting out to consumers is great, and they're interested because it's almost like a little how it's made
Yeah.
on something in your closet, a lot of these social media channels. So I think the kind of re-education for consumers is getting there.
Hmm.
um, and hopefully once it is there, the buck will kind of stop being passed on, like, is it the consumer's responsibility to make sustainable purchases? Is it the brand's responsibility to just do things sustainably? So
Hmm.
I think, yeah, once everybody is kind of on the same page about how things work,
Hmm.
more shifts in a positive direction will be able to take place.
Yeah. No, that's definitely why the conversation around transparency is so prevalent too.
Mhm.
Like even yeah, even on the denim purvey side, a lot of fun innovations and a lot of creativity and effort can be put into a lot of things, but if it's not communicated, like how will anybody know? Like, and how will those methods be supported? Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so I definitely hear you on that. Hopefully, this
Yeah.
podcast is we're trying to help bridge that gap definitely between consumer, producer,
It's
and behind the scenes and the world.
yeah. Yeah, no, and I think, I was reading something about social media statistics the other day, and there was something like 60% of users who go on Instagram and TikTok want to learn something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's also interesting because it's not just these,
Mm-hmm.
endless scrolling of what your friends did over the weekend. Like, people genuinely want to be taking in information, and yeah, there's so many platforms that are just, they're growing and they're educating consumers not only about how things are made, but about the supply chain and the pitfalls, and just all the little nuances of the industry,
Mm-hmm.
that people otherwise would have no idea about. So
Yeah, and you know, um, since you do operate at Denim Dudes, kind of in this space with, where consumers are following you, just denim heads and also producers, can you tell us a bit about how you approach marketing and storytelling to stay truthful and transparent, but still approachable?
right, yeah, so um marketing's a tough one because in terms of environmental sustainability, that's where greenwashing comes into play a lot. um, and I think the best thing, I guess, a brand or a supplier can do is to just be honest, and the fact that no one is 100% sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
um, because if they were, things would be a lot different. And it's just to be honest. And I think it was back in, my gosh, like 2018, I think Noah was the first brand that I remember who did it, who put out the statement of like, we are not sustainable. Like, these are, we're producing clothing, therefore we're not sustainable, but these are the things we're working towards to be
Mm-hmm.
sustainable. And then following that, I mean, there was a massive amount of brands who came out and did the same thing. And I think it was kind of interesting how the brands who are truly focused on sustainability and doing better are the ones who came out and were very transparent and very honest about, these are our carbon emissions, we're not sustainable, we're working on it.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think, just again, honesty and
Mm-hmm.
transparency, it resonates with consumers these days. And that's sort of a trend you're seeing everywhere, from the more like lo-fi, less highly curated Instagram posts. Like, people just want realness and honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know at this point, we've all seen the news about H&M and Shein. Like, most consumers know at this point that the fashion industry is not great for the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just being honest
Mm-hmm.
about your environmental impact, and what you want to do to change that,
Mm-hmm.
to move forward. And then, in terms of cultural and social sustainability, that I would think more on a brand side is about, the collaborations. And if you're a big brand, using your platform to give a smaller brand or creative a voice to tell their story. I think it was last year, UGG collaborated with Tremaine Emery from Denim Tears. And it was a really beautiful
Mm-hmm.
collaboration because they said, you tell your story. We don't we don't know this. Like, this isn't our history. This is your history. You tell the story. And then they, did the collaboration and then backed up all of that storytelling by donating to nonprofits that were going back into the community whose story he was telling to
Mm,
begin with.
mm-hmm,
So it's really these rounded out things of it's not, there has to be action, I
mm-hmm,
guess,
mm-hmm,
behind the marketing and behind the storytelling. And I mean, in the supply chain, we see it a lot too, where, you know, mills are allotting land to be turned into farmland for workers.
mm-hmm,
And, I know Denim Privé just like planted all their trees,
mm-hmm,
so things like that. It's kind of also about sustaining the
mm-hmm,
community and with which you operate in,
mm-hmm.
especially as a supply chain member.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. I think sometimes it gets overlooked, that where these mills are operating, like they're directly impacting like a local community as well, and
Hmm.
what that looks like, and how that may be less flashy in some ways, but that's maybe more what sometimes needs to get done because that's where they're physically existing. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. No, thanks. Thank you for bringing that up. And then, now that we've had yeah, I just love how much I've learned. And I guess I'm just curious to ask you, like, now that you've been in this industry, kind of seeing different sides, doing different roles, what are some things that have like surprised you? And this could be like in a good way and also in a bad way from, before you were behind the scenes and in depth in the denim world.
Yeah. I guess a couple things that surprised me. One is, I mean, it is such a small, tight knit community. It's
Mm-hmm,
like everyone is, there's one degree of separation between
mm-hmm.
most people. You either know somebody or you know someone who knows someone who worked with someone. Um, so that's always really fun because going to, denim trade shows or any sort of industry events, it is like this giant extended family kind
Mm-hmm.
of coming together. Um, and also the passion. I feel like people don't realize just how passionate about denim,
Yeah,
the denim is.
yeah.
Because I mean, it's such a beautiful, unique textile in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really surprised to see that. I'd kind of heard
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, people stick around denim brands and you'll see the same people. I'm like, okay. And now it's funny because I see people who I went to school with working for different brands and we're seeing each other at trade shows. And it's like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
it really is like a small town, which is
Yeah.
nice. And I guess some things, the not so great things that surprised me, I think is really in any part of the fashion industry, once you're pre-product and experience the supply chain and you know about the production methods and mass production, um, it gets a little disheartening to really learn what the fashion industry's impact on the environment, planet, people has been for the last however many years. Um, but it does give me hope, and I think just the transparency that like social media has brought to the
Mm-hmm.
world, it does give me hope that things can change. But I think we all learned through the pandemic that also the supply chains are so complex.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many moving parts. So I think it's a good and a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
that it's so complex. Because denim, you need all the washes, the finishes, like there's so many little parts to it, but it's also why it's so hard to make these big shifts and massive changes, because you need to implement sustainability in every little piece of the supply chain. It's not just like making one change here and all of a sudden we're sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, since you brought up social media, we see so much, so there's so much transparency in that regard. But I think sometimes it's easy to lose sight that just because I can open my phone up and like see a video of some girl trying on clothes in Italy or something, it doesn't mean that like Italy isn't far away or that like, because sometimes we
Right.
lose the physicality, like in order for the jeans to get inside of my home, like what had to happen, like a lot of physical
Right.
movement, like a lot of things had to go into that. So, no, I think that makes
Yeah.
sense. And yeah.
It's funny because to kind of my friends and family, who aren't in the fashion industry, I always try to explain to them that every garment is technically handmade.
Mm-hmm.
There is somebody at a,
Mm.
unless it's a seamless that was
Yeah.
made on a
Right.
machine,
Yeah.
there is a human behind multiple humans, lots of humans
Mm-hmm.
behind every single piece of clothing. And I think once you start thinking about it like that, and especially when you think about price points and you think about how many people touched this garment
Mm-hmm.
before I bought it, I think that really helps to hammer home how many people and places are affected by the garments you wear. Yeah, I've said that to a lot of different friends. And they're like, "Wow, I've never thought about it like that." And I was like, "You should. You
Mm-hmm.
should think about every purchase like that.
Mm-hmm.
That someone handmade that somewhere because they did. They were sewing it by
Mm-hmm.
hand. That's still how our jeans are made." Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I like that. That's probably gonna save me. Think of like how many hands have touched this. I'll definitely think of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, wow. Thank you so much. I'm also thinking about how, when you're younger and you're growing all the time, it's like easier to not think about the impact of your clothing because you're like, well, I grew out of it, so I need another size. Like I just grew out of it. But in our adult life, it's like I don't have that I don't know excuse so much. So what I have now, I'll probably have in 20 years. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I think that's also shifting as well. I see it in myself too. I'm buying more investment pieces that I'm gonna want in 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and spending a little bit more for something that will last.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, because a lot of what we consume are wants and
Mm-hmm.
not needs. Um, so I think we have to retrain ourselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the major shifts in the industry, they're going to come from both the consumers and the supply chain and brands. I think it's going to have to be a collaborative
Mm-hmm.
effort.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us. You're definitely right to say that the denim community is passionate. So I would just like to end with that note that there's, yeah, people endlessly working to make it more sustainable and more
Mhm.
beautiful. So thanks so much for joining us.
Today, we're all creatives
Mm-hmm.
and we're passionate about this and we want to do this. And, we have to make a living
Mm-hmm.
somehow. And we're lucky enough to be able to be in an industry that we love.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best thing we can do is try to make it better and try to leave a better, planet. It's funny. I heard a quote the other day. I might misquote it. I'm pretty sure it's from like, an Oscar Wilde book.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those quotes. But it was like, we don't inherit land and the earth from our ancestors. We preserve it for our children and for our
Mm-hmm.
descendants.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's funny because I've just been looking at my life through that
Mm-hmm.
lens. And I think if we all kind of look through it at that lens, like we should be stewards of this land. We're
Mm-hmm.
here for a finite amount of time, and then it's gonna go to
Mm-hmm.
our children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how do we leave it better for them?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, if we all just kind of move through the industry and move forward with that in mind, I think really positive things will come out of it.
Yes. Amen, sister.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. We'll end it there and have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you. You too. It was